Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another vlog. We're going to be talking about minimum wage and living wage, primarily looking at it within the context of the United States. Now, for those of you that are new here, I'm just going to let you know what I usually do in the vlogs. I'm not doing that this time. For those of you that have already seen the other ones, kind of a hybridization of what I was doing before. I'm going to share my opinions on the subject matter. And I don't do it to push them on you. I don't do it to try and change your mind. I use it as a starting point for a conversation. And I share my opinions knowing that they're biased and likely ignorant and missing a lot of information going forward. So try not to get your knickers in a knot. If I say something like, he's out to lunch, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I already said that I don't know. I'm going to give you what I do know, no different than what you probably know, or the way that you know it, who you've seen, what you've listened to, what you've read. These sort of shapes our opinions and everything like that. And unless you specifically look into it in depth, you're really not going to be any more knowledgeable than the guy beside you, or in this case, myself. So I use my opinions at a starting point, and normally what I was doing in the other vlogs is the first half I would share my opinions, I would pause, I would take time to look at alternate perspectives or opinions that directly contradicted or conflicted my own. And that way I could get a broader view, not necessarily to change, what side of the spectrum I'm on here. You know what I mean. But to give me a broader view so that when I'm forming my opinions on stuff, I feel better about my decisions because I've broadened my knowledge. And therefore, I think my opinions would be more strongly founded on truth rather than just, my bias and ignorance. Now, in this case here, I'm not taking the pause. I've already done it. I've already done the research. I made sure that I formed and I had the AI say, okay, what are these? Give me some questions that I need to think about and ponder about this. I'll give you my answers and then rip into me. And I tell them not to hold back. I'm not going to be including the pages at the end of this one because honestly, the last one was 18 pages, screenshots of my conversation. This one's like well over, and I came back and forth and was asking like tiny little questions, clarifications, scenarios. It would be probably 50 pages, so whatever. I mean, if you guys want those, again, I can put them in there, but I just feel that they're largely unnecessary. So living wage, minimum wage. Obviously, you guys know what minimum wage is. It's the bare amount legally that any employer in the United States has to pay an employee, whether it's part-time, full-time, whatever the case may be. They have to do it. And it doesn't matter what the job is. That is the bare minimum amount. Does it pay for much? Not really. I mean, I know plenty of people, and you probably know people, maybe unfortunately, you are one of those people where you'd have to actually work more than two or more jobs at minimum wage to just barely scrape by. And maybe you're not even scraping by. And this is where we get into the discussion of a living wage. I'm going to do something that I don't think I would normally do, and I don't know how this is going to impact the video. And those of you are like, well, he's already wrapped it up. It's time to move on. I don't need to watch the rest. After everything that I've researched and asking questions and diving deep, I'm like, why? Why can't do this? Or what happens? What's preventing this? Or what's going on here? What's the difference between this country and that country? What is, why can't something be implemented? And the bottom line at the end of the day, other than a few cities, communities, because there are some very, 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 very few communities that are trying to implement a living wage in the U.S. You can look that up. One is, and this one's not even shocking. I think my eldest son, who's in politics in university, he's like, let me guess, one's in Denver or Colorado. And I'm like, yeah. That is. Again, I'm ignorant as to why, but he nailed that one. I think it was Denver, Colorado is one of them. Another place in California. And if you're a Republican, you're like, yeah, that's because, just calm down. This is what I found out. Based on your current economic and political systems, in addition to cultural norms in the United States right now, and this huge polarization, whatever it is extremely unlikely that you will ever, in the current form, will be able to implement something like a living wage. And in my personal opinion, living wage is the most humane, ethical, and compassionate way to maintain your modern Western world, in the modern systems in the modern Western world. I know I'm trying to articulate my speech so that I don't say the wrong thing, but of course I am going to. Obviously, you see, I get tongue tied and stuff like that. But we're seeing other capitalist democratic societies within the Western world, in Europe primarily, where it's not the same as the United States, but it's still capitalism. It's still democracy. They still have businesses. They still have millionaires. You can still do all that stuff. But the difference is that it's not at the expense of people. And I think that's a big thing. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, I think it's fortunate. I'm just going to be forthright and let you know that a lot of my decisions nowadays and the way that's shaping my opinions, empathy and emotion is a huge part of it. I'm sick to death of hearing people one side, and you hear this all the time. And if you're one of them, you need to stop doing it, because it's so ignorant and irresponsible as a human being to say, facts don't care about your feelings. This is just factual. Well, we're human. We're not machines. We're not binary. Answers are very, very seldom black or white. There are so many nuances. There's so much gray in there. And if you can't see that, then you are largely ignorant. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm just saying you're refusing to see the nuances in the gray area there. Most of them. We are emotional creatures. And while there might be a more right or wrong answer, you cannot discount human emotion from any of those decisions. It is intrinsically part of being a human. Our egos and emotions guide us as much as facts and all that. You cannot say facts don't care about your feelings. Well, if you don't present information, your facts that you want to push on other people, if you don't do it in a constructive manner, which is understanding that people have egos and their emotions, and as soon as you push that, you make them feel stupid, they're going to clam up, and you've done nothing other than to try and prove yourself being smart, which really you're just regurgitating something you've heard by someone else. And you see, I'm getting all rammy here. So let's just get into this too. Living wage. What is it? Living wage basically is the minimum amount. Think of it like not so much minimum wage, the minimum amount that an employer needs to pay an employee for that person, if they're working full time, I'm talking full-time hours, for that person to be able to pay their rent, to put food on the table, to pay for their utilities, like gas, hydro, whatever like that. And again, in cases where, you're getting holes in your clothes, being able to replace your clothes once in a while. It does not mean that you're eating caviar and lobster every night. It doesn't mean that it's enough to buy TVs and go to the French Riviera for vacation, or buy, like fancy clothing or anything like that. It is the bare amount that you need in order to just live, almost exist. It's not lavish. We're not talking about a lavish lifestyle. It is a bare necessity for a person who's willing to work hard and put in 8 hours a day or whatever it is, just to be okay and not, be on the brink of bankruptcy or living on the street. It's not an excessive amount. It's not about greed. And a living wage actually changes from area to area. It's not just one universal thing. That doesn't usually work. Because if you know anything about jobs and moving, and if you've moved around or went from one city or one state to another, the cost of living can change dramatically. If you're in the country or a small town versus the big city, cost of rentals changes crazy. So the living wage actually changes depending on where you are. Unfortunately, if you're American, while it does sound, if you think it sounds nice, which I do believe that it is, your system is not set up. And I'm going to go over a couple of these things. I had to make notes because, or else I'm just going to digress all over the place and not get the points across. And you'll be like, well, what about this? I'm like, damn it, I was supposed to talk about that. You know what I mean? And I'm not attacking anyone. Just because you don't share the same opinions that I do, or something's in your head because it's been compounded over and over again by the politicians and the party that you favor, or people that you look up to, or YouTubers, and they keep saying it, and that's stuck in your head. So when I'm saying this, you're like, no, because it's blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm going to also say this, a little digression, because it's actually part of what I'm going to be talking about in here as well. And I'm just getting to it right now. You need to stop the public, the general public needs to stop just constant. I'm saying completely ignore, but stop taking everything that these politicians and these uber rich people keep telling you all the time. Oh no, it's got to be about this. We got to have freedom. We got to be able to, you can't force minimum wage because it's this. We can't have universal health care because the government should not. I'm like, These are things perpetrated by people that are already affluent, that already have power, that are already rich. And they do it by using you and the common people as stepping stones. And this idea, and they keep selling you this idea that, oh no, you too can be rich. It's the land of the free, everyone like that. But the reality is, and statistically, that very few of you, most of you, maybe all of you watching this, will never be rich, will never achieve that. But the idea that you might allows you to be used as a stepping stone so that the people in power can maintain that power. Because if you start saying, hey, you know what? Why don't you take better care of us? Like, you're paying all these taxes to the government. Why aren't you taking better care of us? But they're like, no, they're not supposed to. Well, why not? Isn't it the point of paying taxes? You can have better roads, you can have better hospitals, you can have better infrastructure. Why not, spill it over into, say, education, spill it over into healthcare, like the rest of the Western world going forward, and have the happiest rating, like people, the happy meter, they're happy. They pay so much taxes, but they don't care. They're happy with their lives. Whereas all I see online and people is the misery. You're like, oh, we're fighting for this and fighting for that. You guys have so much power and so much money coming into your government. You could revolutionize the Western world. But because of the current problems with the system and cultural differences, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And there's so many things that would have to change for it to happen. So unfortunately, I just, unless your city decides to try and do it, it's not set up to help you. So low skill jobs and their right to a living wage. So we're talking about like minimum wage jobs, mom and pop places, McDonald's or anything like that. And there is a distinguishing factor between these two in terms of being able to provide a living wage. There's the argument that if you do a living wage with mom and pop places who are profit margins are very, very narrow, that you could basically bankrupt them. They wouldn't be able to sustain that. And I'm not arguing that. And that is a reality. But that issue exists, again, because you don't have these social structures and systems set up to help support that. You wouldn't need to have all of that. You wouldn't have to worry about these small companies providing health benefits. You know what I mean? The living wage, if they had to provide a living wage, well, maybe arguably the living wage includes the ability to have healthcare coverage if you're sick, right? Like, I would assume you'd want that as a bare necessity to live a comfortable life in such a progressive, Western world. Like, I would think that's normal. And for that case there, having a living wage that supports that, I don't think small businesses could handle that. And even if they didn't and they wanted to provide benefits through it, it's too much. It's cost prohibitive. I get that. Now, in terms of big companies like Walmart and McDonald's, the other thing is, hey, listen, if they all have to stop paying minimum wage and pay a living wage, which would be considerably higher than minimum right now, that's going to result in increases in prices. It's going to result in inflation and in unemployment things. These are things that you've probably heard. You've probably been told that. They're like, oh, well, you can't raise minimum wage because it's going to cause inflation. It's going to cause this. There are already cases. I'm going to give you a perfect example. And we're not talking about the countries. We're like, well, that country is totally different. Again, these are things that are constantly fed into your head by politicians and millionaires to prevent you from actually looking at this and saying, okay, yeah, sure. It's like taking a lawnmower engine and trying to put it in the Mack truck, and the US is the Mack truck. Well, the engine's not going to fit, but the core principles of what makes that engine work and operate can be translated into something that might fit in that Mack truck. You make it bigger, make it stronger, but make it fit there. There's always ways around it. It's whether or not you actually want to do that. So in companies like, say, McDonald's, okay, in Denmark, the lowest rate, every person, like I say minimum wage, let's just say minimum wage so you think about it. They have a living wage. They don't have a minimum wage there. The starting hourly rate in a McDonald's job in Denmark is around 21 or 22 US dollars per hour. The cost of a Big Mac there is $4.60 some odd cents US. There was minimal to no impact on the cost of goods. What was impacted was the business's ability to make so much profit. So the question is, how much profit is reasonable? How much profit how much money do you need? How many more millions do these companies need? I'm not saying don't. They need to have profit for companies to expand. So a mom and pop place, maybe like even McDonald's, started as a single restaurant. But through profits, it was able to expand. And by expanding, regardless as to whether you like McDonald's, by expanding, it employed so many more people, thousands and thousands of people, and around the world. So profits are part of this. I do recognize it, and you should too. They need to make profits. They have to have that surplus. But how much is reasonable? How much is reasonable, even in a mom and pop place? You start a business with the dream of becoming affluent. You risk your house, you mortgage it up. You're the one risking it. I think you should get definitely a bigger piece of the pie. But should your ability to become a millionaire, even as a mom and pop, should it come at the expense of your employees? You're like, well, I can't, or I might go bankrupt. Well, okay, that's fine, but maybe slow it down. Maybe it shouldn't go as fast as it is. Maybe we have a responsibility, I think, morally, ethically, so that you're not using employees as stepping stones at any expense. So they don't get to live comfortably, even if they're giving you everything. They're giving you full-time hours, or you're splitting it up so you don't have to pay benefits and you're doing part-time, but you are essentially paying people full-time hours, all to support your dream. And you're not willing to let them live with dignity and I'm not talking again about Gucci's, large screen TVs. I'm talking about paying their rent and putting food in front of their table. At what point is it fair and it's not fair? But again, as I said in the very beginning, you're not set up for this to happen, unfortunately. There's another one, what is it? Where's the wage compression? They were talking about wage compression here. Oh, it was a low skill job. So the alternate perspectives, the ones that are like, hey, yeah, that's nice and everything, and kumbaya and unicorns and puppy dogs and all that stuff. But some argue that wages should reflect productivity, scarcity, and market value, and that oversupply of low skill labor justifies lower wages. There's a concern that universal living wages could cause wage compression. Now, I had to look this up because I was ignorant on it. I'm like, wage compression, what does that mean? It basically just means this. Say you're starting in a normal job, and there's a minimum wage entry, right? So people that start in the job start at $8 an hour. But after years of working and advancements, someone who's been there for a long time, who's a senior, could make $30. So the difference between 8 and 30 is quite big, and it could provide incentive, like, oh, I'm starting here, but look where I could end up. I could end up at 30. So I'm willing to suffer through this. Some people are willing to suffer through that to get to that 30. But what happens is when you bring up a living wage, say it's 20 some odd dollars, suddenly this big gap here is brought up to here. And it's like, okay, so this person here who's worked all these years is like, well, I've been working for 30 years, and the dude that you just hired who's zero skill, zero commitment to this company is almost making what I'm making. Like, why am I going to work so hard? And vice versa, if that person who's starting, like, well, why am I going to work so hard to get there? And I understand that, but that's because, again, it's not set up. You're not used to it. In countries, again, I'll use it as an example because it's one of the best ways to exemplify this sort of idea of universal and living wages, because they've been doing it for a while and everything is working for them. But because culturally it is the norm, someone who's working for 30 years, they're like, oh, a new employee, they don't even think about it. They don't care. They want the support. They like the idea as a society, as a culture of Danish people. They like the idea that even someone who just started, whether they're a youth, and they have no experience, that they can at least live comfortably. They don't get jealous. They're like, oh, well, I've been doing this and I should get more. That is a result of, again, possible unnecessary greed. I do this, I deserve more. And I'm not saying that hard work shouldn't be rewarded. There still is, you can still become a millionaire. You can still get the job increases, but how much is enough? Like, do you need to make sure that, like, look at me, I made all this. Well, you are making more. How much more do you need to do? Is this for your ego at this point? You see what I'm saying? So there's issues with that. It's a cultural thing because you're not used to it. The idea of that, again, you may be arguing that, like, well, that's not fair. It's not gonna give me any incentive. Well, if that's true, then all those nations over there, Denmark included, would be stagnated. And that's not true. They're continuing to prosper. They're continuing to push forward. The people there are happy. They're in more in sync with their government. They're in sync with unions, whereas unions here are actually on the decline because they're in conflict with the employers, they're in conflict with the government. It's not set up. We're not set up currently. I say we, the United States and technically Canada. Our political systems, our economic systems, and our cultural systems or cultural identity here and cultural norms are not set up to support that sort of mentality. But they're accepted. The government doesn't see unions as the enemy. The people don't see unions as the enemy, and the employers don't. They all work together. And until something like that happens in the United States or in Canada, for that matter, you're never going to have that cohesiveness. I find it very frustrating when I see a place that has so much money and so much ability to actually provide these services to the masses, but it's never done. A thing like living wage could totally be accomplished in the United States. You're one of the most powerful nations in the world. You've done so much. And I know my fellow Canadians are like, stop talking nice about the US, there's tariffs and all this other stuff. I get it. The world's really angry. If you don't know and you're an American, world's not very happy with you guys right now. And I'll admit, I have a little bit of, I'm not terribly fond of what's happening there. But if I'm completely honest with you and transparent, I love the United States. I've loved it since I was a kid. I've looked up to it. I see what it's done. I understand its contributions to the world. It's leading the charge. Capitalism wasn't created in the United States. It was actually created in Europe, probably actually before largely America was America. But in England, in Holland, France, all those other places, that's where capital is. But it's exemplified and almost quasi, I guess, perfected, although I hate to use that word because I don't think it is, in America. He has led the charge. I love that. I love visiting there. I love seeing what's coming out of there. I love the Hollywood movies and how I've been entertained because of America and the amount of quality that you have brought my life. And right now I'm paid by an American company. I've been able to provide for my family and pay for my kids' education because of America. I have a lot of love. That doesn't mean that I'm blind to the issues and problems of America. I want nothing more than for you to actually have the best country in the world. I don't care. I don't feel like, no, Canada's got to be the best. I like Canada. I served in the military. I believe in Canada. But there's something about the United States. But I think that I think you're being manipulated heavily by the rich, by the politicians, into believing certain things that you guys completely could have and should have, like living wages, like free education. I know that's a big one. Like, that's outrageous. It's not. It could be completely done. But because of this idea that, profit is more important than the well-being of the American people. That's what it is. When you're pushing that ideal of, I can be rich at the expense of my neighbors, and that's it. Is that what America is? Is that the American dream? Anyone has the opportunity. It's true, but should it be at the expense of other Americans? I don't think it is. I think that's a terribly selfish way to look at things. I'm not saying get rid of capitalism. I'm saying evolve it. Here's a perfect example, and I'm going to leave it at this. I've rambled on. I didn't even really follow this. I'm sure I digressed all over the place. I just got really passionate about this and looking at it. So I started with the minimum wage and living wage, which it's not going to be feasible, plausible, whatever in the current system. If I talk about this, let me leave you with this, and you can look all of this up. Don't take my word on it, okay? You guys could have the absolute, hands down, best healthcare system, free, universal healthcare system in the entire world, by far. But because of these ideas that and I'm not blaming any of you guys because it's propaganda. It's why marketing works. It's why propaganda works. It's why they do it. And you are the one suffering, but you're led to believe that it's a bad idea, that you shouldn't do it. I've heard so many arguments like, the federal government shouldn't control them. Like, the federal government already has the money. They already have the money, and you're saying, don't use that money on us because it's wrong. They already have the money. In most of the world, in the Western world, that have all the countries, whether it's Germany, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Canada even, the highest amount that the government spends per person for this universal healthcare, like free across the board, poor or rich, is about, I think it's 6,000 to 7,000 US dollars per person. That's what the government spends on it. And they have universal free healthcare. The United States government, are you ready for this? The United States government pays more than double that amount. They already have the amount. You guys, in your taxes, the government literally spends 12 to 13,000 US dollars per US citizen already. Maybe at this point here, you should be like, well, where's that money going? That's a very good question. That money is going to private insurance companies who make billions of dollars, pharmaceutical companies that extort you for overpriced friggin' pharmaceuticals, because they do, they're vastly overpriced, all in the name of making profits in capitalism. You don't benefit. You're not the billionaire. You're not making millions. And most of those costs for the healthcare system, that 12, 13,000, primarily go to admin costs, administrative costs in insurance companies, not even to paying the insurance companies for actual services and goods. It goes to employing all the people and the staff there. You know what I mean? All you're doing is they're taking your money to make other people money. They're taking your money to make more jobs instead of taking that money that's meant for your health care, and they're shifting it to all these other people instead of giving it to you. You literally spend twice than the most amount that any other Western nation spends on universal healthcare. You could easily tomorrow flip the script, done. The problem is that you have all these insurance companies, you have the greedy pharmaceutical companies, because let's face it, they're greedy as heck, and you guys are paying the price for this. It's a terrible thing. I do stand up across the board. I don't care what your political alignment is. I don't care about all these other things that you're fighting about. I want all of you as Americans, and you should have it. And you have the ability to have it. You have so much money there and so much power, but it's not being distributed to you. And you're being manipulated by the same political rhetoric and all these arguments made by people. But those people are already rich. Of course they don't want you to support it. Of course they want to keep planting it. And you do. You regurgitate it. I hear it all the time. I see it in comments all the time. I'm like, yeah, well, we can't because of this. And yeah, no, freedom, you can't take our rights away. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what you're arguing about? The same thing with free education. Oh no, we can't do that. Why not? Then the poorest of poor, as long as that person was intelligent, no matter what, no matter who they are, no matter what their financial status is, whether they're living in a mansion or in borderline streets, if you're smart enough to be a doctor, the system is set up that you will be a doctor. That's great for your country. It's great for your people. You would invest in your people, maximizing it. And if you even say, oh, it doesn't work, it's already working in multiple countries. It's already working. And again, I get it. Different engine, really big Mack truck, but it's just a matter of changing. And I'm not saying that your situation is completely the same, because it's not, obviously, but there's ways of doing it. It's whether or not the American people actually want to do it, and whether they'll wake up and say, hey, this actually isn't great for us. Just the 1-2%, which I know you've heard, but it's true, the 1-2%, they're making out like bandits. You're paying the price, but you're constantly being fed information that makes you feel like it's not possible and it shouldn't be, and you shouldn't do this because it's going to do this and it's going to do that. Whereas the real life, real world examples are already showing that that's not true. You just have to change it. And unfortunately, the system is very corrupt and not in the favor of the average American. And I don't know. It's very frustrating for me to hear things online. Most of the stuff, the people that counter it, I've heard all before, and all I hear is a politician. When you're saying it, it's not even your opinion. All you're doing is mimicking, parroting, regurgitating whatever you've heard. But it's been told to you so many times, it's like, this is how I feel. Well, if you've never looked into it and the alternate perspectives or things that contradict your opinions and ideologies, how are you ever going to change? How are you ever going to actually see the broad picture and go, wait a second, maybe that's not necessarily true? I'm not saying it can change overnight, but you're the ones who have to do it. You as an American have to do this. And I hope that eventually we do see that. I hope you guys lead the charge again and make the best of what America can be, because there's already so much money. It's just being misused and misappropriated. And I'm not saying anything to do with your current administration, and that's what they're doing. I'm just saying this has existed long before the current political party has been in here. It's happened for decades, and it could have been fixed, but it's not, because that would go into the pockets of the uber rich, which, some of you want to get there, which likely you'll never get there. I'm not saying don't try, because some people do. I'm just saying, what's the possibility you're going to live your life based on the fact that you might do that? Or do you want to just make sure that you, your family, your friends, that you're all taken care of, you all work hard, and you have the best country in the world? I don't know. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on that. If you guys want to see anything else, any other topics, and by the way, you can completely disagree with everything that I said. I do tend to get a little emotional, and I don't mean to emotionally charge this content, but I can't help it. But I'm always on the side of you, not inside of the people, the millionaires, and everything like that. Very rarely will I ever take that side. It's just the way I am. I don't want to be your enemy, even if what I'm saying kind of goes against what you believe in, okay? I'm not here to try and change your mind. What I believe is the best for you. I just want to share that with you. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. See you in the next vlog. If you got any ideas, put them in the comments below.